My boyfriend left me for a better woman, the one his family had proudly chosen for him. Everyone smiled, everyone approved. I didn't argue, beg, or humiliate myself by asking him to remember everything we had built together. I simply stepped aside and disappeared from their lives. Almost 2 years later, when he heard my name announced in a room where I mattered far more than his family name, his face went pale before anyone even turned to look at him. My name is Claire Bennett. I'm 36 now, financially independent, and no longer interested in proving my worth to people who measure human beings by family names and trust funds. But I wasn't always that certain of myself. I met Ethan Whitmore when I was 29. He was 26 and came from the kind of old money family whose last name opened doors before anyone even knocked. At the time, I worked as a freelance operational consultant, helping mid-sized companies fix broken systems, reduce costs, and recover from poor management decisions. I earned a comfortable living, but I didn't own a company, inherit wealth, or come from a family whose name carried influence. My parents had spent their entire careers teaching in public schools. We lived comfortably, but nothing about my background would have impressed Ethan's social circle. We met at a gallery opening through a mutual acquaintance. The room was full of people pretending to admire abstract paintings while quietly sizing up one another's status. I was studying a large grey canvas when Ethan stepped beside me. "Do you understand it?" he asked. "Not even slightly." He laughed. "At least you're honest." "What do you think it means?" I looked at the painting for a moment before lowering his voice. "I think the artist realized wealthy people will pay more if nobody understands what they're looking at." I laughed loudly enough to earn a disapproving glance from a nearby guest. "You're the first person here who's actually looking at the art instead of working the room," he said. "And you're the first person willing to admit it might be expensive nonsense." That was how it started. For the next 18 months, our relationship felt effortless. We spent weekends exploring farmers markets, taking aimless road trips, hiking nearby trails, and ending our evenings in small neighborhood bars where local musicians played for half-empty rooms. Ethan never made me feel ashamed of where I came from. He listened when I talked about work, remembered details about my clients, and admired that I'd built my career without anyone clearing the path for me. "You always figure it out," he told me once. "That's what I like about you." I believed him. Around 8 months into our relationship, he invited me to dinner with his parents. Calling it a house hardly did it justice. The stone estate sat behind iron gates, surrounded by manicured gardens and a circular driveway large enough to resemble a hotel entrance. Before we walked inside, Ethan squeezed my hand. "They can be formal," he said. "Don't let it intimidate you." I smiled. "I negotiate with executives who blame software for mistakes they made themselves. I can survive dinner." He smiled back. "That's exactly why I love you." It was the first time he'd ever said those words. Seconds later, the front door opened. His mother, Margaret Whitmore, welcomed us with a flawless smile that never quite reached her eyes. His father, Charles, shook my hand while studying me as though I were a business proposal instead of his son's girlfriend. Ethan's older brother, Nathan, had married into another wealthy family, while his younger sister, Julia, was already being prepared for a leadership role in the family real estate business. The Whitmores owned commercial properties across 3 states. Charles had inherited a substantial portfolio and expanded it into an empire, while Margaret divided her time between non-profit boards, fundraising committees, and exclusive social organizations. Then there was me, a self-employed consultant with no inherited wealth, no influential surname, and a degree from a state university. Dinner remained perfectly polite. Charles asked about my work, and I explained that I helped companies improve operations during periods of growth or restructuring. "So you move from client to client?" "Depending on the project. No interest in joining an established firm. I enjoy choosing the problems I solve." I gave a faint smile. Independent, grounded. At the time, I took it as a compliment. Much later I realized grounded was simply his polite way of describing someone whose ambitions he considered limited. My parents had spent their lives teaching in public schools. My father taught high school history for more than 30 years, while my mother retired after decades of teaching elementary students. They valued integrity over income, and I had always been proud of that. When Margaret asked what they did, I answered without hesitation. "How admirable," she replied. Her words sounded warm, but her attention had already drifted elsewhere. For the first year, Ethan's family remained politely distant. They included me when etiquette required it, asked the occasional question over dinner, and treated me with the kind of courtesy that never developed into acceptance. I brought thoughtful gifts, remembered birthdays, and showed genuine interest in their lives, but nothing changed. They had judged me the night we met, and every visit afterwards simply confirmed that opinion. Everything shifted around our 20th month together. During dinner one evening, Charles casually mentioned a woman named Olivia Hart. "Olivia moved back last week. She's joining a private wealth management firm downtown." "The Hart's daughter," Margaret added. "You remember her, Ethan." "We grew up attending some of the same events," Ethan replied. Charles gave a satisfied nod. You should reconnect. She's doing extremely well. Ethan glanced toward me. I'm not sure Claire would appreciate my parents introducing me to other women. Margaret smiled as though he'd made an amusing joke. Don't be dramatic. Olivia is practically family. At first, I convinced myself I was reading too much into it. Then Olivia started appearing at family dinners. She was elegant, intelligent, and effortlessly comfortable in their world. She never flirted with Ethan or treated me poorly, but she didn't have to. Margaret always found a seat beside Ethan, while Charles eagerly drew both of them into conversations about finance, investments, and business opportunities that left me sitting quietly across the table. One evening, after nearly an hour of listening to them discuss development funds, I mentioned a new client contract I'd secured. Margaret smiled politely before turning back to Olivia. That reminds me, didn't your firm recently advise on a manufacturing acquisition? The conversation moved on without me. Driving home, I finally broke the silence. They're pushing her toward you. I know. You say that like there's nothing you can do. What do you expect me to do? Throw her out? I expect you to tell your parents it's disrespectful to parade another woman in front of your girlfriend. I have. Not in a way they believe. He tightened his grip on the steering wheel. They don't listen to me. Then make them. Hein said nothing. The silence between us felt heavier than any argument we'd ever had. After several minutes, he spoke quietly. You don't understand what it's like dealing with them. You're right. My parents would never deliberately humiliate you. That isn't fair. Neither was tonight. He parked outside my apartment but left the engine running. I'm trying. I looked at him, searching for the man who once admired people who built their own path. How hard? What does that mean? It means they're showing you the woman they approve of and waiting for you to fall in line. I'm with you. But are you willing to make that clear to them? I looked away. That was the moment I realized Ethan might love me, yet still lack the courage to choose me. Over the following weeks, Olivia appeared at more family gatherings, always by coincidence, always seated beside Ethan. Charles and Margaret grew noticeably colder toward me, and I kept telling myself our relationship mattered more than their approval. Deep down, though, I already knew the truth. The Whitmores weren't deciding whether I was good enough anymore. They had already made that decision. Now they were simply waiting for Ethan to accept the future they had chosen for him. The pressure became increasingly subtle. Margaret questioned my 5-year plan, my retirement savings, and whether freelancing could ever become a stable career. Do you plan to stay independent indefinitely? She asked one Sunday afternoon as we sat beneath a garden canopy. For now, it lets me choose the right clients, but flexibility can become instability. Ethan shifted uneasily beside me, but once again stayed silent. Mom, I'm only asking. She turned back to me. What about retirement? I contribute to a private retirement account. And property? I rent. Margaret's smile never faltered. At your age? I was 31, financially stable, and perfectly capable of buying a home if I wanted to, yet the way she asked made renting sound like a personal failure. Charles was even more direct. At another dinner, he asked why I hadn't joined an established consulting firm. I've had offers. And declined them? Yes. Why? I like choosing the work I take. He set down his wine glass. Control is valuable. Scale is more valuable. I'm not sure everyone measures success the same way. No, he replied. But some definitions last longer than others. I waited for Ethan to say something. I never did. That became our routine. His parents questioned my career, finances, housing, and future, while Ethan shifted uncomfortably, offered the occasional half-hearted protest, then apologized on the drive home. They're just worried. They didn't mean it that way. They grew up differently. Every excuse widened the distance between us. Meanwhile, Olivia became a regular guest at family gatherings. Sometimes Charles invited her directly, other times Margaret insisted she'd simply stopped by. She fit effortlessly into their world, remembering family traditions, favorite vineyards, trusted bankers, and charity events. I knew Ethan's favorite coffee order and every subtle sign that he was anxious. Olivia knew the world his family valued. That was the difference that mattered to them. After one dinner, I found Ethan alone on the terrace. You knew she was coming. My mother mentioned she might stop by. And you didn't tell me. I didn't think it mattered. It matters when your parents are trying to replace me. They're not replacing you. Then what are they doing? He glanced through the glass doors where Olivia laughed with Margaret and Nathan. They think she's a better fit. His honesty hurt more than denial. And what do you think? He sighed. I think I'm tired of having this argument. That wasn't my question. Hal rubbed a hand across his face. Every time we come here, you're expecting someone to insult you. Because they usually do. They're just asking questions. They're evaluating me. You take everything personally. They're discussing my income, my home, and my future, while deciding whether I'm good enough for you. How else should I take it? His patience finally cracked. You think this is easy for me? No, I think you're standing in the middle because it's easier than choosing a side. I defend you. Where? I held his gaze. When your father called my career unstable? When your mother questioned why I rented? Or 5 minutes ago, when you admitted they think Olivia is a better match and said nothing else? His voice dropped. You want me to cut off my family. I want you to stand beside your partner. They're my family. And I'm the woman you say you love. That isn't the same. The words escaped before he could stop them. He reached for my hand. I didn't mean it like that. I stepped back. You meant exactly what you said. That night he went back to his own apartment instead of staying with me, and for the first time I wondered whether love alone would ever be enough. It was the first time in months Ethan had chosen not to stay the night after a family dinner. The next morning he sent flowers with a note that read, I'm sorry, I'm overwhelmed. I accepted the apology because I loved him, but I couldn't ignore what was happening between us. Over the following 6 months he gradually pulled away. At first the excuses sounded reasonable. He cancelled dinners because Charles needed help with a property deal, skipped weekend hikes for family brunches, and replied to messages hours later because work was busy. Eventually the pattern became impossible to ignore. The breaking point came on our anniversary. My father invited people over tonight, he said. Olivia? A brief silence. She might be there, so you're cancelling our anniversary to have dinner with the woman your family wants you to marry. It's not like that. Then tell me what it's like. My father expects me there. And what do you expect from yourself? I had no answer. I spent the evening alone with a bottle of wine and the restaurant reservation still open on my phone. At 11:30 he texted, still awake? I turned my phone over and never replied. The following morning he arrived with pastries and another apology. I let him in because I still loved him, but every apology sounded exactly like the one before. They're using you to control me, he admitted after explaining that his parents were threatening his future role in the family business. Then stop letting them. You make it sound easy. I didn't say it was easy, I said it was necessary. By then, every conversation about our future ended the same way. Whenever I asked about marriage, living together, or whether he expected me to keep enduring his family's treatment, he answered with vague promises. Not right now. Let's get through this first. We don't have to decide today. The man who once made plans without hesitation suddenly needed time for every commitment. About 2.5 years into our relationship, he called one Thursday afternoon. Can I come over tonight? Something in his voice immediately told me this wasn't an ordinary visit. When he arrived, he didn't kiss me or even notice the dinner I'd cooked. He remained near the doorway until I finally asked, what happened? My parents want to have a serious conversation this weekend. They have serious conversations every weekend. This one's about us. I sat across from him. What are you going to tell them? I don't know. Yes, you do. He stared at the simple silver band I'd given him for his birthday as he slowly turned it around his finger. They're going to make this about loyalty, responsibility, and what's best for my future. And what do you think is best? After a long silence, he finally answered, I love you. But I love my family too. That shouldn't require a but. His shoulders slumped. They've made it clear that staying with you will have consequences. What kind? They're restructuring trusts, ownership shares, and my future in the company. They're threatening to cut you off. Not completely, just enough. They think they're protecting you, he said quietly. From me? Hein didn't answer. Instead, he repeated everything I'd heard for months. They don't think your career is stable. My career supports me. They don't see a foundation. I built my own. They mean something permanent. A company, a house, a wealthy father. His frustration finally surfaced. This is why talking to you has become impossible. Because I understand exactly what they're saying. No, because you reduce everything to money. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Your family has spent months measuring my worth by money, Ethan. They're thinking about long-term compatibility. They're thinking about pedigree. Hen sank back into the sofa. I've been fighting them. Have you? I've defended you in conversations you never heard. Then why are you here? Silence filled the room. Finally, he looked down and admitted, I'm exhausted. So am I. Every family dinner turns into another battle. And you want the battles to end. Yes, even if that means losing us. Hung pressed his lips together. That was all the answer I needed. They threatened your inheritance, spent months pushing Olivia toward you, and now you're repeating their arguments. I'm not repeating anyone. You called me unstable. I said the situation is unstable. You questioned whether we're compatible. I said I don't know anymore. That isn't any better. He paced across the room before stopping beside the window. What do you want from me? I want you to say what you came here to say. His eyes filled. I don't know if I can lose my family. I never asked you to. They're the ones making you choose. But I'm the one who has to live with the consequences. And I'm the consequence you're willing to give up. I looked away. I'd imagined this conversation countless times. thinking I would cry, argue, or remind him of every promise we'd made. Instead, I realized none of it would matter. He had already made his choice. He'd only come hoping I'd make it easier for him. If you're looking for permission to leave, I said quietly, you have it. He stared at me. That's it? You're not going to fight for us? I already have. You've spent 2 years criticizing my family. I've spent 2 years showing up, answering their insults with respect, and trying to prove myself to people who decided I wasn't enough before they even knew me. That isn't what I meant. You wanted me to beg. His face crumpled. I wanted a reason to stand up to them. I was supposed to be that reason. Tears rolled down his face. Part of me wanted to comfort him. Instead, I stayed where I was. Your family chose Olivia long before you did. Nothing I build or achieve will ever change their minds. And if you need their approval before you can choose me, then we never had a future. I do love you. I know. Somehow that hurt him more than anger. Love isn't the problem, I said. Courage is. He wiped his eyes. That's unfair. Maybe, but it's true. He paused at the door. I wish you'd made this harder. I think I've made it easy for you long enough. I walked away without taking off the birthday ring I'd given him. 2 days later, a message arrived. I spoke to my family. I've decided to be with Olivia. This isn't about choosing money over love. It's about choosing a life where I don't have to fight the people I love every day. I read it twice. There was no apology, only another attempt to make surrender sound reasonable. I never replied. Without another thought, I blocked his number, packed the belongings he'd left behind, arranged for the concierge to return them, and reopened an email I'd ignored 6 months earlier. It was from Daniel Mercer, a former client who wanted us to build a consulting firm together. He had the industry connections. I had the operational expertise, but I turned him down because my business felt comfortable. Now comfort felt like hiding. I called him. You still interested in building that firm? I thought you said the timing was wrong. It was. And now? I looked around the apartment where Ethan had decided my future wasn't secure enough. Now it's perfect. Within weeks, Daniel and I signed a partnership agreement, invested our own money, rented a modest office, and buried ourselves in work. Long days replaced heartbreak, and client proposals replaced memories. 3 months later, we landed our first major manufacturing client. Instead of handing them another report, I worked alongside their managers, rebuilt broken processes, and stayed until the systems actually worked. When the project ended, production delays had dropped nearly 30%, costs stabilized, and referrals started arriving almost immediately. By 6 months, we had 8 active clients. By 9 months, we were comfortably profitable, hired additional consultants, and had more work than we could accept. One afternoon, our newest consultant, Megan, hesitated outside my office. I had lunch with someone who knows Ethan. I looked up. They said he and Olivia are engaged. I expected heartbreak. What I felt was distance. Somewhere between 14-hour workdays, new clients, and building a company from the ground up, my life had quietly stopped revolving around his choices. That evening, Daniel found me still staring at my laptop. Bad news? Ethan's engaged. He nodded sympathetically. You don't sound devastated. I'm not. What are you then? I thought about it for a moment. Disappointed. In him? In the version of us I thought was real. Neither of us mentioned Ethan again. The company kept growing. 10 months after the breakup, a private equity firm offered to acquire us. Daniel wanted to sell, but I wasn't finished building. We eventually accepted a strategic investment instead, selling only a minority stake while keeping control of the business. The deal changed my financial future, but the moment that mattered most came later that day when I told my parents. My father removed his glasses after seeing the numbers. We're proud of you. My mother squeezed my hand. Not because of the money, she said, because you built it yourself. A month later, I bought my first home. Around 14 months after the breakup, I received an invitation to speak at an industry conference in Ashton, the city where Ethan and the Whitmores still lived. Daniel noticed my hesitation. You don't have to go. My work earned this invitation, I said. Not my last name. So I went. The conference exceeded every expectation. Business owners asked questions, executives exchanged cards, and new opportunities appeared one after another. For the first time since the breakup, I wasn't being introduced as someone's girlfriend. I was simply Claire Bennett, a founder, consultant, and speaker whose work finally spoke louder than anyone else's opinion. As I finished another conversation, someone called my name. Claire! I turned to see Ryan Ellis, an acquaintance from Ethan's old social circle. We had never been close, but we'd attended enough dinners together to recognize each other immediately. I had no idea you were speaking here, he said. It's been a while. It has. I glanced at my conference badge. So what have you been up to? I gave him the short version. Launching a consulting firm, growing it quickly, and bringing in an investment partner. With every sentence, his expression shifted from curiosity to disbelief, then finally respect. That's incredible. I haven't exactly advertised it. He laughed. I can see that. Before leaving, he mentioned a networking reception that evening. Mostly conference guests and local business leaders. You should come. It sounded like another business event, so I agreed. I had no idea it would bring me face to face with my past. The reception filled the ballroom of one of Ashton's oldest hotels. Executives drifted from conversation to conversation while I spent nearly 40 minutes introducing myself, exchanging business cards, and discussing potential projects. As I reached for a glass of sparkling water, I saw them. Charles Whitmore, Margaret, Nathan, several familiar faces from Ethan's family. For a moment, I was back at their dinner table, answering polite questions while they quietly judged whether I belonged. Charles still carried the same effortless confidence, the certainty that he'd always been right. I almost walked over, not to confront him, simply to let him see me. Then I realized I no longer needed that moment. Instead, I quietly left the ballroom, sat in my rental car until my heartbeat settled, and drove away believing that chapter of my life was finally over. A week later, Daniel forwarded me an email. A Regional Manufacturing Consortium wanted to discuss a major operational transformation project worth several $1 million. It came from someone you met at the conference, Daniel said. There is one complication. It's in Ashton. The city no longer intimidated me. Only the memories did. After thinking about it, I nodded. We're pursuing it. Preparing the proposal took weeks, but when presentation day arrived, Daniel and I answered every question the board threw at us. 2 weeks later, we received the call. We had won. The contract required frequent trips to Ashton, and before long the city became just another place to work instead of a reminder of my past. About 2 months into the project, I had dinner with Richard Lawson, the consortium's executive director. During our conversation, he casually mentioned Charles Whitmore. He recently stepped back from one of the business boards. I heard there were family issues. What kind? Richard shrugged. Just rumors. Apparently, his son's marriage isn't going well. I simply nodded and steered the conversation back to business. Driving back to the hotel, I thought about what he'd said. Not because I felt satisfaction, but because it didn't match the perfect future Ethan had chosen. Then I reminded myself it wasn't my life anymore. 2 weeks later, the local Chamber of Commerce hosted a networking luncheon that most regional executives attended. I checked in, accepted my name badge, and immediately froze. Across the ballroom stood Ethan. He hadn't seen me yet. He looked thinner, older, and noticeably more tired. His tailored suit and expensive watch were unchanged, but neither could hide the exhaustion on his face. I almost turned around. Before I could, the event host spotted me. Claire! His voice carried across the room. There you are. I've been looking everywhere. Heads turned toward me, including Ethan's. With no graceful way to leave, I smiled and joined the group. The host introduced me warmly. Everyone, this is Claire Bennett. Her firm is leading the Consortium Transformation Project. Several executives immediately recognized the name. The Consortium hired you. We did. I've heard excellent things. Your implementation plan is already being talked about. I thanked them, answered questions about our work, and exchanged business cards. Only then did I notice another conversation nearby had fallen completely silent. I turned. Ethan's group was watching us. The host followed their gaze. You all know each other? Before either of us answered, another executive smiled. Claire, tell everyone about your company. The conversation shifted entirely toward me. I explained our approach, the firm's rapid growth, and how the consortium project had expanded into several new engagements. More business cards appeared, meetings were suggested, and someone even asked whether we accepted international clients. I answered each question calmly. Only once did I glance toward Ethan. The moment our eyes met, the color drained from his face. He looked as though the ground had disappeared beneath him. Without saying a word, I turned back to the executives and continued the conversation. To everyone else, he was simply another guest. A few minutes later, I heard a chair scrape softly behind me. Ethan quietly set down his untouched drink, said something to the people beside him, and walked out of the ballroom. After he left, the host leaned toward me. That looked awkward. We used to know each other. A long time ago. Long enough. He nodded. I've heard his marriage hasn't been going very well. I simply took another sip of water. That's unfortunate. They say both families had enormous expectations. Pressure like that rarely ends well. No, I agreed. It usually doesn't. When I left the hotel, I expected to feel victorious. What surprised me was how peaceful I felt. 2 years earlier, I'd imagined confronting Ethan countless times. It turned out silence was far more powerful than revenge. Over the following weeks, old acquaintances, former mutual friends, and even business contacts connected to Ethan's family suddenly began reaching out. Every conversation started politely before drifting toward the same subject. Ethan. One afternoon, my college friend Rachel called. Ethan wants your phone number. What did you tell him? That I'd ask you first. He says he just wants closure. I looked across my office at the team moving between conference rooms. He already got his closure, I said, the day he chose his family's approval over us. So what should I tell him? Nothing? And don't give him my number. Rachel understood immediately. I thought you'd say that. I assumed that would end it. Instead, the requests continued. Over the next few weeks, several mutual acquaintances asked whether I'd be willing to speak with Ethan. My answer never changed. No. One evening, Daniel looked up from his laptop. You're distracted. I'm working. You've read the same page 3 times. I smiled. You're observant. It's part of the job. He closed his computer. Wanna talk? Ethan keeps trying to reach me through mutual friends. And I'm not interested. He studied me for a moment before nodding. Good. Daniel quietly returned to work without another word. He offered no speeches or advice, only quiet trust, and I'd almost forgotten how peaceful that felt. 2 weeks later, another business reception brought me back to Ashton. I arrived early and spent the evening moving from one client conversation to the next, discussing expansion opportunities and future partnerships. About halfway through the event, I noticed Ethan across the ballroom. He hadn't approached me yet, but every time I finished a conversation, he seemed to drift a little closer. Daniel followed my gaze. You know him? I used to. You want to leave? I glanced around the room. More than a dozen potential clients were still there, and leaving now would only draw attention. No, we stay. If he comes over, I'll handle it. Daniel simply nodded. Nearly 20 minutes later, Ethan finally started walking toward us. Before he could reach us, one of the event organizers intercepted him. Ethan, I need you for a quick introduction. After one last glance in my direction, he reluctantly followed the organizer. Daniel raised an eyebrow. Convenient. I noticed, I replied. We left before Ethan had another opportunity. I found myself remembering the man I'd fallen in love with, the one who laughed at abstract paintings, and once drove 3 hours just to surprise me with breakfast after a difficult week. The memories were real, but the man trying to reach me now no longer resembled the one who had created them. Another month passed and our consortium project continued exceeding expectations. Then Daniel walked into my office carrying a proposal. You need to see this. The client name immediately caught my attention. Whitmore Property Group. They're requesting an operational review. The contract was substantial, large enough to keep one division busy for almost a year. From a business standpoint, it's an excellent opportunity, Daniel admitted as he sat across from me. But personally, it puts your team back inside the offices of the people who spent years telling you that you weren't good enough. I didn't need to say anything else. I closed the folder, slid it back across the desk, and made my decision. We decline. You sure? Completely. Daniel accepted the answer without another question. I'll take care of it. The rejection was brief and professional. He explained that our firm avoided engagements where prior personal relationships could compromise our objectivity. I assumed that would end the matter. 2 days later, he returned. Charles Whitmore called personally. And? He insisted the proposal was strictly business and spent nearly 10 minutes explaining how much they admired our work. I couldn't help smiling. That's a change. He also argued that personal history shouldn't interfere with business. What did you tell him? That protecting our firm's independence is part of our business. Daniel smiled faintly. I wasn't happy. I never expected him to be, I replied. He hesitated before adding one final detail. I implied your decision was emotional. I looked back at the proposal before closing the folder. No, I said calmly. It's strategic. Protecting this company means knowing which opportunities are worth accepting and which ones cost too much. Daniel gave a quiet laugh. I know. A week later, my assistant forwarded an email marked External Inquiry. The sender was Ethan Whitmore. He no longer had my personal email, so he'd written to the company's public address. I opened it. On Claire. Leaving you was the biggest mistake of my life. Everyone assumed marrying Olivia would make things easier. Instead, it only made them quieter and lonelier. You were right about my family, about me, and about everything I refused to admit. I chose security over happiness, and I've regretted that decision every day. I'm not asking for forgiveness or another chance. I only wanted you to know that I finally understand what I lost. Ethan. I read it twice. Every line sounded sincere. That still didn't change my decision. Regret can explain the past. It can't rebuild trust. Daniel stepped into my office. You all right? Without saying a word, I turned the monitor so he could read the message. When he finished, he looked at me. You going to answer? 2 years earlier, I would have spent hours searching for the right words. Now there weren't any. No. I deleted the email. The conversation ended the night he walked out of my apartment. Daniel accepted that without another question. Fair enough. Life moved on. The consortium project entered its final phase. Our team expanded again, and new clients continued arriving through referrals. Then Ethan tried one last time. During another trip to Ashton, I stopped at a cafe before my first meeting. About 10 minutes later, Ethan walked in. He spotted me immediately and started toward my table. Before he'd taken 3 steps, I stood, gathered my laptop and coffee, paid the bill, and walked out. By the time he reached the table, I was already crossing the street. I never looked back. That evening, another email arrived. I understand. You've moved on. Watching you build the life I was too afraid to believe in has been harder than losing you. I hope you're happy. You deserve to be. This time I replied with a single sentence. I hope you find what you're looking for, but you won't find it by walking backward. Then I blocked his email address. It wasn't revenge. It was a boundary. 3 months later, the consortium renewed our contract, several new manufacturers hired us, and our reputation across the region continued growing. Around the same time, I heard Ethan had filed for divorce. Daniel mentioned it over lunch. You okay hearing that? I thought for a moment. I'm not happy about it. No, I just hope he eventually starts making decisions because he believes in them. Daniel smiled. That sounds exactly like you. Several months later, I met Michael Hayes, the CFO of one of our manufacturing clients. Unlike anyone I dated before, Michael cared more about character than appearances. He'd paid his own way through college, built his career from the ground up, and never once asked me to prove I belonged. After one late strategy session, we walked toward the parking garage together. You work too much, he said. So I've been told. Frequently? By everyone. He laughed. I'll add my name to the list. Being with him felt effortless. Our conversations drifted from difficult clients to delayed flights and terrible airport security lines instead of family status or financial pedigree. One evening, he smiled across the table. You know what I like most about you? What? You never pretend. I'll take that as a compliment. You should. For the first time in years, a relationship felt peaceful instead of exhausting. Meanwhile, the company kept growing. One office became 2, then 3, and by the end of the year, we employed 20 consultants across several states. Most of our business came through referrals, and before long, conference invitations, keynote speeches, and industry interviews became routine. The recognition mattered, but not because it proved anyone wrong. It mattered because every opportunity had been earned. About 8 months after Ethan's final email, I returned to Ashton to deliver the opening keynote at a conference attended by more than 600 people. During the question and answer session, someone asked, "What was the biggest obstacle early in your career?" I answered honestly. For years, I believed my value depended on other people's approval. Eventually, I realized it didn't. The moment I stopped trying to earn acceptance was the moment I finally started building the life I wanted. When I finished, the audience rose to its feet. Afterward, Ryan Ellis approached. Ethan was here. I figured. He bought a ticket himself. Did he say anything? Ryan shook his head. No, but he cried. For a second, I pictured him sitting quietly in the back of the ballroom. Then I turned back to Ryan. I hope he's all right, I said. Ryan looked surprised. That's all? I already have my closure. Life continued, moving forward. Michael met my parents and fit naturally into our family. No one judged anyone. No one questioned whether someone belonged. One afternoon, during a flight home, Michael asked, "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if Ethan had chosen you?" Sometimes. And? I think we would have been happy for a while, but the real problem was never his family. It was Ethan. He couldn't separate his own voice from theirs. Eventually that would have surfaced somewhere else. Michael gently took my hand. So you don't miss the relationship. I miss the version of him I believed existed. He smiled. There's a difference. There is. Months later, after another keynote in Ashton, Charles Whitmore approached me. I misjudged you, he admitted. I underestimated what you were capable of building. Years earlier, I dreamed of hearing those words. Now they carried almost no weight. I appreciate you saying that, I replied. But your opinion never determined my value. His expression softened. I understand. I don't think I understood that back then. Neither did I. He apologized once more before quietly walking away. Watching him disappear into the crowd, I realized I was thinking about lunch with Daniel and the messages waiting from Michael instead of replaying the conversation. My life had become too full for old ghosts. That evening, I stood on my hotel balcony overlooking the city lights. I stood there for another minute, watching Ashton stretch beneath the evening sky. My phone vibrated. A message from Michael. Finished. Dinner's getting cold. I smiled, slipped my phone into my pocket, and headed for the door. The city remained outside. My future didn't. I stepped back into the room, closed the balcony door behind me, and let the city disappear on the other side of the glass.